Caleb Drummond's hands were shaking when he tore the bill of sale in half. Not from fear. Not from the cold. From the look in her eyes, the Chinese girl he'd just bought for $3 at a livestock auction in Sagebrush Hollow, Wyoming. She was staring at him like he was either the first kind man she'd ever met or the most dangerous. He didn't know which one was true. But he knew one thing the moment that paper ripped: every man in town wanted him dead. And her, they wanted her gone. This is that story. Before we begin, if you're new here, subscribe to this channel and follow this story all the way to the end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The auctioneer's voice cracked like a whip across the morning heat. Next lot, one female, Chinese, young, good health, starts at $1. Caleb Drummond wasn't supposed to be there. He'd ridden 12 miles into Sagebrush Hollow for salt coffee and 10 feet of good rope. His ranch was running on fumes, and so was he. $3 in his pocket. That was the sum total of everything Caleb Drummond was worth on that July morning in 1878. He heard the crowd before he saw it. A knot of men pressing forward near the old feed warehouse, shoving each other for a better look. Caleb knew the sound of an auction. He'd been to hundreds. Cattle, horses, land. But this sound was different. There was a hunger in it, something ugly that made the back of his neck prickle. He pushed through. And then he saw her. A girl stood on a wooden shipping crate. Chinese. Maybe 20, maybe younger, hard to tell with the bruises. Her hair was matted, her dress was torn at the shoulder. Her wrists were raw from rope burns. But she wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was standing perfectly still, with her chin raised, staring straight ahead, at nothing, like she'd decided to leave her body and go somewhere these men couldn't follow. That's what stopped Caleb cold. Not the bruises. Not the ropes. That look. He'd seen it before in the eyes of soldiers at Antietam, who knew they were about to die and had made peace with it. $1. Do I hear $1? A hand went up. Caleb recognized the man. Garvey ran a mining camp east of town. Worked his Chinese laborers until they dropped, then buried them in unmarked graves. $1.50. Another hand. Wade Haskell's foreman, a thick-necked man named Pruitt, who everyone knew beat his workers for sport. $2. The girl didn't flinch, didn't blink. She just stood there like a statue carved from something harder than stone. $2.50. Wade Haskell himself raised his hand. The biggest rancher in 3 counties, rich enough to buy anything he wanted, cruel enough to enjoy breaking what he bought. His son Dale stood beside him, grinning like a cat watching a mouse. $2.50 to Mr. Haskell. Do I hear 3? Silence. The auctioneer raised his gavel. Going once. Caleb opened his mouth and heard someone else's voice come out. $3. Every head turned. Wade Haskell's face went dark. Dale's grin vanished. The auctioneer squinted at Caleb like he was trying to place him. $3 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear $3.50? Haskell stared at Caleb for a long, cold moment. Then he shook his head once and stepped back. Not because $3.50 was too rich for him. Because Wade Haskell didn't bid against desperate men. He'd find another way to get what he wanted. He always did. $3. Going once. Going twice. Sold. The gavel came down. The sound split the morning like a rifle shot. And just like that, Caleb Drummond owned a human being. The girl's eyes found his. For one heartbeat, something passed between them, not understanding, not trust, just a flicker of recognition. 2 people standing in the wreckage of something neither one of them had planned. Then she looked away, and the moment was gone. The auctioneer's name was Sully. He had yellow teeth and a handshake like a dead fish. "Bill of sale," Sully said, holding out a smudged piece of paper. "Legal and binding. She's yours, same as a horse or a plow." Caleb stared at the paper. His stomach turned. Where'd she come from? Doesn't matter where she came from. Matters where she's going. Sully wiggled the paper impatiently. You want her or not? Because I got 3 men behind you who'll take her off your hands right now. Caleb took the paper, folded it without reading it, shoved it in his coat pocket. Her name, Caleb said. What's her name? Sully laughed. Hell if I know. They don't come with names, mister. They come with bills of sale. Caleb turned away from the man before he did something he'd regret. The girl was still standing on the crate. Nobody had helped her down. Nobody had offered her water in the July heat. She was swaying slightly, and Caleb realized she was probably half-starved and dehydrated. He approached slowly, stopped 6 feet away, held up both hands so she could see they were empty. My name's Caleb, he said. Caleb Drummond. I've got a ranch about 10 miles west of here. She watched him the way a cornered animal watches a predator. Alert, calculating, ready to run or fight. Can you tell me your name? Nothing. Do you speak English? A long pause, then so quiet, he almost missed it. Leon. Leon, he repeated. That's a fine name. Leon, are you thirsty? Another pause. A small nod. Quick, like she was ashamed to admit it. There's a water trough right over there. Let's get you something to drink. He took 1 step forward, and she flinched so hard she nearly fell off the crate. Her hands came up, palms out, a gesture so instinctive, so practiced, that Caleb felt his chest crack right down the middle. Someone had taught her that flinch. Someone had taught her that hands coming toward her meant pain. He stopped, took a step back, held still. I'm not going to hurt you, he said. I know those words don't mean much coming from a stranger. I know you've probably heard them before from men who didn't mean it, but I'm telling you anyway because it's the truth. She studied his face. Her eyes moved across it like she was reading something written there, searching for the lie. Then slowly she stepped down from the crate on her own. Her legs wobbled, but she stayed upright. Water, she said. Please. They didn't make it to the water trough. They made it about 30 feet before Dale Haskell stepped into their path. He was 24 years old, built like a barn, and mean enough to make rattlesnakes nervous. Well now, Dale said, thumbs hooked in his belt, what exactly are you planning to do with that Drummond? Step aside, Dale. My father wanted her, you know that. He's not a man who likes being outbid. Your father can buy his own coffee. I'm not interested in his problems. Dale's eyes moved to Leon. He looked her up and down the way a man looks at livestock he's appraising. She's skinny. Probably can't even cook. What'd you pay $3? I'll give you $5 right now, and we'll call it a favor. She's not for sale. Dale laughed. Everything's for sale, old man. That's how the world works. Not my world. Caleb stepped between Dale and Leon. Now move. Something shifted in Dale's face. The amusement drained out of it, replaced by something harder. My pa's going to hear about this. Your pa knows where to find me. 10 miles west. End of the Valley Road. He's welcome to come discuss it any time. Dale held his ground for a long moment, his jaw working. Then he spat in the dirt at Caleb's feet and walked away. Behind Caleb, Leon let out a breath she'd been holding. That man, she whispered. He is dangerous. Yes, Caleb said. He is. You are not afraid. Caleb turned to look at her. I'm afraid of plenty, but not of Dale Haskell. She almost smiled. Almost. The water trough was near the general store. Caleb cupped his hands and brought water to Leon because the trough was too tall for her to reach comfortably. She drank like she hadn't had water in days. Probably hadn't. When did you eat last? He asked. She shook her head. Either she didn't understand the question or she didn't want to answer it. There's a boarding house down the street. Mrs. Calloway's. She serves good food, and she's a good woman. Let's get you fed. They walked 2 blocks. Every eye on the street followed them. Caleb could hear the whispers spreading like fire through dry grass. A white rancher and a Chinese girl walking side by side through the center of town. He knew what they were thinking. He didn't care. Mrs. Ruth Calloway was sweeping her front porch when they arrived. She was 60 years old, wide as a door, and had a face that could curdle milk or melt butter depending on how she felt about you. She took one look at Leon, and the broom stopped moving. "Lord have mercy," Ruth said softly. "Bring her inside." "Some folks might have a problem with that," Caleb said. "Some folks can eat somewhere else." Ruth held the door open. "Get that child in here before she falls down." Inside the boarding house, dining room had 6 tables. 4 were occupied. When Caleb walked in with Leon, 2 tables emptied within a minute. The men didn't say anything. They just picked up their plates, left coins on the table, and walked out. The remaining 2 tables were occupied by an old prospector who was too drunk to notice anything, and a young preacher named Samuel who looked at Leon with something that might have been compassion. Ruth sat Leon down at a corner table and disappeared into the kitchen. She came back with a plate piled high, beef stew, cornbread, 2 biscuits, and a glass of milk. "Eat," Ruth said. "All of it." Leon stared at the plate. Her hands were shaking. She picked up the spoon, then put it down. Picked it up again. "It's all right," Caleb said quietly. "Nobody's going to take it away." She ate. Slowly at first, carefully, like she was testing whether the food was real. Then faster. Then she stopped herself, put the spoon down, and sat very straight, like she was embarrassed by her own hunger. "Don't you dare stop eating," Ruth said from behind the counter. "I didn't cook that food so it could sit there getting cold." Leon looked at Ruth. Something shifted in her face, the first crack in that stone wall she'd built around herself. Her eyes glistened. "Thank you," Leon whispered. "Thank you, ma'am." Ruth's tough expression crumbled for just a second. She turned away quickly and busied herself with dishes, but Caleb could see her wiping her eyes with her apron. They were halfway through the meal when the door opened and Sheriff Nolan Birch walked in. Birch was a quiet man, tall, lean, with a mustache that made him look older than his 40 years. He wasn't the kind of lawman who made speeches. He was the kind who watched and waited and spoke only when words mattered. He pulled up a chair at Caleb's table and sat down without being invited. "Heard about what happened at the auction," Birch said. "News travels fast. In this town, faster than a bullet." Birch looked at Leon, who had stopped eating the moment he sat down. "Miss, you can keep eating. I'm not here to cause trouble." Leon didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the star pinned to Birch's chest. "She's afraid of you," Caleb said. "She's smart to be." Birch leaned back in his chair. "Caleb, you know what you've done here today? Bought a girl at auction for $3? You've painted a target on your back is what you've done. Wade Haskell was in my office 20 minutes ago. He's not happy, and when Wade's not happy, bad things tend to happen to people. Wade Haskell doesn't scare me. He should. He's got 30 men working his ranch. You've got nobody." Birch lowered his voice. "I can keep the peace in town. That's my job, and I'll do it. But your ranch is 10 miles out. That's beyond my reach, Caleb. You understand what I'm saying?" "I understand." "Do you? Because right now there's talk on the street. Ugly talk. About what you plan to do with her. About why a man living alone would buy a young Chinese girl." The words landed like a punch. Caleb looked at Leon, who was listening intently, even though she was pretending not to. "I plan to take her to my ranch," Caleb said slowly. "Give her a safe place to stay until she figures out what she wants to do with her life. That's all." Birch studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I believe you, but believing you and being able to protect you are 2 different things." He stood up. "Get her out of town before sundown. And Caleb, keep your rifle loaded." After Birch left, the dining room fell silent. Even the drunk prospector seemed to be listening. Leon put down her spoon. "He is right," she said. "I bring you trouble. Much trouble. That trouble was already here before you. You do not know me. Why you do this?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. He looked at the table, at his own weathered hands, at the cracks in the wood. 5 years ago," he said, "my wife got sick. Fever took her in 3 days. I sat beside her bed the whole time and I couldn't do a damn thing to help her. Couldn't save her. Couldn't fix it. Just had to sit there and watch. He looked up at Leanne. Today I could do something, so I did. Leanne held his gaze. Her eyes were dark and deep and full of things she hadn't said yet. Your wife, she said softly. She was good woman, best person I ever knew. She would be proud, what you did today. Caleb's throat tightened. He hadn't talked about Margaret in years, hadn't said her name out loud in months. And here was this girl, this stranger, finding the one thing he needed to hear. Maybe, he said, maybe she would. They left through the back door of the boarding house because Ruth had seen men gathering on the main street. Ruth gave Leanne a bundle of food wrapped in cloth and an old shawl that smelled like lavender. You take care of her, Ruth told Caleb, and you take care of yourself. Hear me? Yes, ma'am. And you, Ruth said to Leanne, taking the girl's hands in her own. You're stronger than you know. Don't let anyone tell you different. Leanne gripped Ruth's hands tightly. I will not forget your kindness, Mrs. Calloway. Just Ruth, child. Just Ruth. Caleb's horse was tied behind the mercantile. He'd have to ride double with Leanne, no time to find a second mount. The sun was already dropping toward the western hills, and Birch's warning echoed in his mind. Get her out of town before sundown. He helped Leanne onto the horse. She was lighter than he expected, too light, and she gripped the saddle horn with both hands like it was the only solid thing in her world. Caleb swung up behind her and took the reins. Hold on, we've got a long ride. They made it to the edge of town without incident. The main street was behind them. The open valley stretched ahead 10 miles of grassland and scrub brush between Sagebrush Hollow and the Drummond Ranch. For a few minutes, Caleb let himself believe they might actually make it. Then Leanne spoke. Riders, she said, behind us. Caleb turned. 4 men on horseback had emerged from the town and were heading in their direction. Even at this distance, he could see the set of their shoulders. These weren't men out for an evening ride. How fast can your horse run? Leanne asked. Fast enough. Caleb tightened his grip on the reins. But we're not running. Why not? Because if we run now, we'll be running forever. He stopped the horse and turned it to face the approaching riders. Reached down and pulled his rifle from the saddle scabbard. Laid it across his lap. The 4 riders pulled up 50 yards away. Dale Haskell was in the lead. Behind him, 3 ranch hands, big men armed and looking for trouble. Evening, Drummond, Dale called out. Headed home. I am. Long ride. Dangerous too. All kinds of things can happen on a dark road. Dale edged his horse forward. My father sent me with a message. He'll give you $10 for the girl. That's more than triple what you paid. Good business if you think about it. Tell your father no. He said you'd say that. Dale's voice hardened. He also said to tell you that $10 is a generous offer, and that his next offer won't be so friendly. Caleb lifted the rifle, not pointing it, just letting the fading sunlight catch the barrel. I heard the message, Caleb said. Here's mine. That girl sitting in front of me is under my protection. She's not for sale. She's not for trade. She's not for taking. Any man who tries will answer to this rifle. And Dale, I don't miss. The evening air hung between them like held breath. Dale's horse shifted nervously. The 3 men behind him exchanged glances. You're making a mistake, Drummond. Wouldn't be my first. Dale stared at him for a long, hot moment. Then he yanked his horse's head around and rode back toward town, his men following. The sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance until there was nothing left but wind and the sound of crickets waking up in the tall grass. Leanne let out a slow breath. Her back was pressed against Caleb's chest, and he could feel her heartbeat fast like a trapped bird. They will come back, she said. Probably. You cannot fight them all. Probably not. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, why did you not take the money? $10 is much. Caleb nudged the horse forward, and they started moving toward the ranch again. The sky was turning orange and purple, the last light of the day, bleeding out over the valley. Because you're not something to be sold, Leon. You're a person. And a person's got a right to decide where she goes and what she does. That's not my decision to make. It's yours. She didn't respond. But after a moment, he felt her relax just slightly against his chest. Not trust, not yet. But something close to it. Something that might become trust if he gave it enough time. They rode in silence as the stars came out one by one, until the valley was lit by nothing but moonlight and the distant glow of a ranch house waiting at the end of the road. Caleb Drummond had woken up that morning with $3 and an empty life. He was coming home with no money, a girl he couldn't communicate with, and every powerful man in the territory wanting him dead. And for the first time in 5 years, he felt like he had a reason to get up tomorrow. The ranch house was dark when they arrived. Caleb helped Leon down from the horse, and she stood in the yard, perfectly still, listening to the silence, like she was trying to decide if it was safe or just a different kind of danger. "It's not much," Caleb said, tying the horse to the fence post. "2 rooms, a kitchen, a porch. Roof leaks when it rains, but it hasn't rained in 6 weeks, so that's not a problem yet." Leon said nothing. She was looking at the house the way a person looks at something they don't quite believe is real. Caleb lit a lamp inside, and the warm glow spilled across a simple room. A table, 2 chairs, a wood stove. Margaret's old curtains still hung in the windows, faded from years of sun. He'd never had the heart to take them down. "You can have the bedroom," he said. "I'll sleep out here." "No." Leon shook her head firmly. "I sleep here, on floor, is fine." "You're not sleeping on the floor." "I have slept on worse." The words came out flat. No self-pity, just fact. And that made it worse. Caleb pulled a blanket from the chest by the wall and laid it on the narrow cot in the main room. "Then you sleep here. I'll take the porch. I've slept on that porch more nights than I can count. Prefer it honestly." Leon touched the blanket with her fingertips, ran her hand across it slowly, like she was memorizing the texture. "This was hers," she said. "Your wife." Caleb paused. "How'd you know that?" "It smells like lavender. A man living alone does not keep lavender." He stared at her. There was a sharpness behind those dark eyes that he hadn't seen before, a mind that was working even when her body was exhausted. "You're right," he said. "It was Margaret's. I will be careful with it." "I know you will." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "Leon, there's a rifle above the fireplace and a pistol in the kitchen drawer. You know how to use a gun." "No." "I'll teach you tomorrow. Tonight, if anyone comes to that door who isn't me, you scream as loud as you can. I'll be right outside." She nodded. Then, as he was stepping onto the porch, "Caleb." He turned. "Thank you. For the blanket." She wasn't thanking him for the blanket. They both knew that. "Good night, Leon." He closed the door and sat down in the old rocking chair on the porch with his rifle across his knees. The valley stretched out before him, silver under the moonlight. Somewhere out there, Wade Haskell was making plans. Dale was nursing his bruised pride, and the men of Sagebrush Hollow were deciding whose side they were on. Caleb rocked slowly, listening to the night. After a while, he heard something from inside the house. Quiet. Almost inaudible. Leon was crying. Not the loud, heaving kind. The kind a person learns when they've spent years crying in places where being heard means being punished. Soft, controlled, muffled into a pillow. Caleb gripped his rifle tighter and stared at the stars and let her have her grief in private. Some things a man couldn't fix. Some things just needed to be let out. The crying lasted about 10 minutes. Then it stopped. Then there was silence. He didn't sleep. Not that night. Dawn came in hot and gold. Caleb was making coffee on the wood stove when the bedroom, the main room, went quiet in a different way. He turned to find Leon standing in the doorway watching him. She'd washed her face, pulled her hair back with a strip of cloth she'd torn from somewhere. The bruises were still there, purple and yellow on her arms, but something in her posture had changed overnight. She was standing straighter, shoulders back. "Coffee," he offered. "I do not know this drink. It's bitter. Most people don't like it at first, but it wakes you up." She took the cup and sipped. Her face twisted. Caleb almost laughed, but she took another sip anyway and squared her jaw like she was going to drink it if it killed her. "You don't have to finish it. I finish what I start." She set the cup down and looked at him directly. "What do you want me to do?" "What do you mean? You bought me. You brought me here. What is my work? Cooking, cleaning. What do you expect?" The question hit him harder than he expected. She was already preparing herself for the transaction, the deal, because in her experience, nothing came free. Every meal had a price. Every kindness had a hook. "I don't expect anything, Leon." "Everyone expects something." "Then I reckon I'm not everyone." She studied him, that sharp, searching look again. "Then what am I here?" Caleb poured his own coffee and sat down at the table. "You're here because you needed somewhere safe. You can stay as long as you want. Leave whenever you want. Work if you want to work. Rest if you need rest. This is your home for as long as you need one." "Home?" She repeated the word like it was in a foreign language, which in a way it was. "I have not had a home in 2 years. 2 years." She sat down across from him, wrapped both hands around the coffee cup like she needed something to hold on to. "I came from Canton, Guangzhou. My father was a healer. He used plants, herbs. People came from far away to see him." "What happened?" Her grip tightened on the cup. "Men came, foreign men. They told my father there was work in America. Good work, a hospital that needed someone who understood Chinese medicine. They would pay for our passage. My father believed them. And it was a lie. My father died on the ship, fever. They threw his body in the ocean." Her voice didn't waver. She said it the way a person says something they've replayed so many times it's lost its edges. "When we arrived in San Francisco, they separated the women, sold us. I was sold 4 times before I came to Sagebrush Hollow." 4 times. Caleb's hand tightened around his coffee cup until his knuckles went white. "The men who sold you at the auction, who were they?" "I do not know their real names. They move from town to town. They buy Chinese girls in San Francisco and sell them in small towns where no one asks questions." Someone should ask questions. Someone should. No one does. She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "Until you." Before Caleb could respond, the sound of a horse approaching cut through the morning quiet. Caleb was on his feet, instantly, rifle in hand. He moved to the window. A single rider was coming up the valley road. Not rushing. Taking his time. As the rider got closer, Caleb recognized the hat. Wide-brimmed black. The kind only one man in the territory wore. "Stay inside," Caleb said. "Who is it wishing you, Wade Haskell?" Leon's face went pale, but she didn't move to hide. She stood up from the table and positioned herself behind Caleb, not cowering, watching. Ready. Caleb stepped onto the porch. Wade Haskell brought his horse to a stop in the yard and dismounted slowly. He was 52 years old, lean and sun-dried, with eyes the color of creek water, clear and cold. He moved like a man who'd never been told no in his life and didn't intend to start hearing it now. "Morning, Drummond." "Haskell." "Rode a long way. You going to offer me coffee?" "Depends on why you're here." Wade looked around the ranch, the sagging fence, the barn that needed a new roof, the garden that had gone to weeds. "Place has seen better days?" "Didn't ride 10 miles to talk about my fence." Wade smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "No, I didn't." He reached into his coat and pulled out a leather wallet. Opened it. Began counting bills onto the porch railing. $20, he said, laying down the last bill. For the girl. Dale offered 10 last night. Dale's young, doesn't understand negotiation. Wade straightened up. 20 is my final offer. Take it, Caleb. Fix your fence, fix your barn, buy yourself a proper herd. $20 is a new start. So is saying no. Wade's jaw tightened. Just a fraction. You're being foolish. Maybe. You think you're being noble, righteous. But let me tell you what's really going to happen. Wade stepped closer to the porch. Every man in Sagebrush Hollow is going to turn against you. The general store won't sell to you. The blacksmith won't shoe your horse. When your well runs dry, and it will, this drought isn't breaking anytime soon, nobody's going to help you dig a new one. I've survived worse. Have you? Wade's voice dropped. Because this isn't just about you anymore. That girl in there, you think you're protecting her. You're painting a target on her back. Every drunk with a grudge, every miner who lost his bid at that auction, they know where you live. And I can't control what desperate men do on dark nights. That a threat, Wade? That's reality. Wade collected his money from the railing and tucked it back into his wallet. I'm giving you a way out, a clean way, no shame in it. You sell her to me, I put her to work on my ranch, honest work, cooking and cleaning, and everyone goes back to their lives. The front door opened, both men turned. Lion stepped onto the porch. She'd heard everything. Her chin was raised, her back was straight, and her eyes were burning with something that Caleb hadn't seen before. Anger. Real, deep, uncontrolled anger. I am not for sale, she said. Her English was careful, but her voice was iron. Not today, not ever again. Wade stared at her like she'd grown a second head. In his world, Chinese girls didn't talk back. They didn't even make eye contact. I wasn't speaking to you, girl. You were speaking about me. That is the same. Wade looked at Caleb. You let her talk to people like that. I don't let her do anything, Caleb said. She's a free person. She talks however she pleases. Something dark passed across Wade's face. The mask of civility slipped, and for just a moment, Caleb saw the real man underneath a man who couldn't stand being defied, who saw the world as a hierarchy with himself at the top and everyone else scrambling below. You'll regret this, Wade said quietly. Both of you. He mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. The dust from his horse's hooves hung in the air long after he'd gone. Caleb turned to Leon. That was either very brave or very stupid. In my experience, she said, those are often the same thing. And this time, she did smile. Small, fierce, defiant. Like a candle someone had tried to blow out and couldn't. The rest of the morning, Caleb taught Leon the ranch. Not because he expected her to work, because she asked. She followed him from the barn to the well, to the chicken coop, asking questions about everything. How much water did the horses need? When did the chickens lay? What were the brown patches in the pasture? Drought, Caleb said. Ground's been baking since May. If it doesn't rain by August, I'll lose the whole grazing field. Leon knelt and pressed her hand against the dry earth, scooped up a handful and let it sift through her fingers. This soil is not dead, she said. It is sleeping. Sleeping. My father taught me. There are plants that can wake the soil, deep-rooted plants that pull water from below. And there are ways to keep moisture in the ground. My father's garden survived 3 droughts. Caleb looked at her with new eyes. You know farming. I know growing things. It is different from farming. Farming is about taking from the soil. Growing is about giving to it. She brushed the dirt from her hands. If you will let me, I can help. Leon, I told you, you don't owe me anything. This is not about owing. She stood up and met his eyes. This is about choosing. You chose to help me. Now I choose to help you. That is not debt. That is partnership. Partnership. The word hung between them. Caleb hadn't had a partner since Margaret, hadn't wanted one, hadn't thought he deserved one. All right, he said. Show me what you know. She spent the next 2 hours in his neglected garden. He watched her work pulling weeds, testing soil, mapping out rows with a stick, and something shifted in how he saw her. She wasn't a girl who needed saving. She was a woman who'd been robbed of the chance to show what she could do. By noon, she'd sketched out a plan in the dirt. Squash here, beans there, herbs along the border, deep-rooted plants in the corners to pull up groundwater. It was more sophisticated than anything Caleb had seen from the experienced ranchers in the territory. "Where'd you learn all this?" "My father." A shadow crossed her face. "He said plants are honest. They do not lie. They do not pretend. If you treat them well, they reward you. If you neglect them, they die. Simple truth." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was foolish enough to trust strangers who promised him a new life." She jabbed her stick into the dirt. "And wise enough to teach his daughter everything he knew before they killed him." Caleb heard the crack in her voice, the anger underneath it. Not the hot anger of the moment, the cold, slow-burning kind that had been building for 2 years. The kind that either destroys a person or forges them into something unbreakable. "We'll need seeds," she said, pulling herself back together. "And wood for raised beds. And something to carry water." "I can get wood from the barn. Seeds might be harder. The general store in town is the only place that sells them, and after yesterday, they will not sell to you." "Probably not. Then we find another way." She looked at the hills beyond the ranch. "In China, my father found seeds everywhere. Wild plants, riverbanks, abandoned gardens. Seeds do not care who picks them up." Caleb was about to respond when Leon held up her hand. She'd gone completely still, her head tilted listening. "What is it?" "Horses. More than one. Coming from the east." Caleb couldn't hear anything, but he'd learned in the last 24 hours that Leon's ears were sharper than his. He grabbed his rifle from where it leaned against the porch and moved to the front of the house. 2 minutes later, he heard them too. Hoofbeats. 3 horses, maybe 4, coming at a trot up the eastern ridge, the back way to his ranch, the way someone would come if they didn't want to be seen from the main road. "Inside," Caleb said. "No." Leon picked up a pitchfork from the barn doorway. "I am done hiding." "Leon?" "I said no." He looked at her standing there with a pitchfork and bruises and that fire in her eyes, and he didn't argue. The riders came over the ridge. 3 men. Not Haskell's men. Caleb didn't recognize them. They were rough-looking, unshaven, wearing dusters despite the heat. The kind of men who drifted from town to town looking for trouble or pay, whichever came first. The lead rider pulled up at the edge of the yard. He had a scar running from his left eye to his jaw and a grin that showed too many teeth. "Drummond." "Who's asking?" "Name's Polk. These here are my associates. We heard you got something that belongs to a friend of ours." "Nothing here belongs to your friend." Polk's eyes moved to Leon, lingered. "See, that's where we disagree. The men who had that girl, the ones who sold her at auction, they want her back. Sale wasn't authorized, they say. They're willing to compensate you for your trouble. Sale's done. Papers signed. She's not going anywhere." Polk shifted in his saddle. "Mr. Drummond, you seem like a reasonable man. Let's be reasonable. You hand over the girl, we give you $50, and nobody gets hurt. That's a lot of money for a man with a ranch that's falling apart." $50. Caleb almost laughed. The price kept going up. First 10, then 20, now 50. By tomorrow, it'd be 100. And all of it for a girl these men saw as cargo. "Get off my land," Caleb said. "Wrong answer." Polk's hand moved toward his gun. But before he could clear the holster, a sound ripped through the air, sharp, loud, and close. Leon had slammed the pitchfork against the metal water trough. The clang was enormous in the quiet valley, and all 3 horses spooked at once. Polk's mount reared. One of the other riders was nearly thrown. The 3rd horse bolted sideways, carrying its rider 20 yards before he could get it under control. In the chaos, Caleb levered a round into his rifle and aimed it squarely at Polk's chest. "I said get off my land. I won't say it again." Polk got his horse under control, his face red with fury. He looked at Leon, who was standing with the pitchfork still in her hands, her expression calm as still water. "You're going to regret that," Polk said. "I have many regrets," Leon said. "You will not be one of them." Something in her voice made Polk hesitate. He looked at Caleb's rifle, looked at Leon's pitchfork, looked at the distance between himself and the nearest cover. "This isn't over," he said. "People keep telling me that," Caleb replied. "And yet here I am." Polk wheeled his horse and the three riders disappeared back over the ridge. The dust settled. The valley went quiet again. Caleb lowered his rifle. His hands were steady, but his heart was hammering. "The pitchfork and the trough," he said. "That was smart." "Horses are easy to scare." Leon set the pitchfork down. "Men who rely on horses are easy to unbalance." "Where'd you learn that?" "Second man who bought me kept horses. I watched. I listened. I learned everything that might help me survive." She looked at him, and there was no fear in her eyes now, only a hardness that had been earned through years of suffering. "I learned many things from the men who owned me, Caleb. None of them know what they taught me." He looked at this woman, not a helpless girl, not a victim waiting to be saved, but a survivor who'd been watching and learning and waiting for her chance to stand on her own ground. "I think I've been underestimating you," he said. "Yes," she said simply. "You have." That evening, Caleb sat on the porch and cleaned his rifle, while Leon cooked something in the kitchen with the supplies Ruth had given them. The smell that drifted out was unlike anything he'd encountered, fragrant complex with spices he couldn't name. She brought him a plate. Rice she'd found in his pantry, mixed with dried beef and wild onions she'd pulled from the field behind the barn, seasoned with herbs he didn't know he had growing along his fence line. He took a bite, then another. Then he looked up at her. "This is the best thing I've eaten in 5 years. It is simple food." Simple doesn't mean easy. Margaret used to say that. Leon sat down on the porch step with her own plate. They ate in silence for a while, watching the sun slide behind the mountains. The heat of the day was finally breaking, and a faint breeze moved across the valley, carrying the smell of sage and dry grass. "Caleb." "Yeah." "Those men today, Polk. They will come back, and they will bring more." "I know." "And Haskell, he will not stop." "I know that too." "You cannot fight everyone alone." "I'm not alone." He looked at her. "I've got a partner with a pitchfork." She didn't laugh. Her face was serious. "I need to tell you something. The men who sold me the ones Polk works for, they are not just traders. They are part of a larger group. They operate along the railroad. Dozens of girls, maybe hundreds. I heard them talking when they thought I could not understand. You understood more than they realized. I understand everything. I have understood every word spoken around me for 2 years. I let them believe I was stupid. It was safer." Caleb set his plate down. "What did you hear? Names, places, dates, how they move the girls, where they keep them before selling. I remember all of it." The weight of what she was telling him settled over Caleb like a cold blanket. This wasn't just about one girl and one rancher anymore. This was bigger. Much bigger. And if the men who ran this operation found out what Leanne knew, what she'd memorized, they wouldn't just come to buy her back. They'd come to make sure she could never talk. "Does anyone else know this?" he asked. "No, only you." "We need to tell Sheriff Birch." "Your sheriff cannot protect us from this. These men have money, power, connections to important people in San Francisco. Birch is one man with a badge in a small town." "Then we need to get this information to someone who can do something with it. A federal marshal, a judge. And how do we do that? We cannot leave this ranch without being followed. We cannot send a letter without it being read. We are trapped here, Caleb." She was right, and the realization hit him like a fist. He'd thought the danger was Wade Haskell, a rich man's bruised ego. But the real danger was something much darker. An organization that trafficked human beings and couldn't afford to let a witness survive. We're not trapped, Caleb said slowly. We just need to be smarter than they are. And how do we do that? He looked out across the valley where the last light was fading and the first stars were appearing. Somewhere out there, men were planning how to take Lian back or silence her permanently. But they were making the same mistake everyone made about this ranch, about Caleb Drummond, about the quiet Chinese woman who'd survived things that would have broken most people. They were underestimating them. Tomorrow, Caleb said. Tomorrow we start fighting back. Lian looked at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, not a smile, not a flicker, he saw something in her eyes that looked like hope. Together, she asked. Together. The word settled between them like a promise. Above them, the summer sky stretched wide and endless, full of stars that had been burning since before any of this mattered. The world was dangerous and cruel and full of men who saw other people as things to be bought and sold. But on this porch, on this broken-down ranch at the edge of nowhere, two people had decided to stop running. And that was enough. For now, that was enough. Caleb was up before dawn. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours. Every sound in the dark, a coyote, a branch cracking the wind shifting, had pulled him back to full alert. He'd sat on that porch with his rifle until the eastern sky turned gray, running through plans in his head, discarding most of them. He was pouring coffee when Lian appeared. She moved quietly. He was learning that about her. She could cross a room without making a sound. A skill learned in places where being noticed meant being hurt. You did not sleep, she said. Slept enough. You are a poor liar, Caleb Drummond. He handed her a cup. She drank it without flinching this time. I've been thinking, he said, about what you told me last night. The names, the places, everything you remember about the trafficking operation. We need to write it all down. And then what? There's a man I served with in the war, Thomas Avery. Last I heard he was working as a federal marshal out of Denver. If I can get a letter to him, a detailed letter with names and routes and dates, he can bring the full weight of federal law down on these men. Denver is far. Letter doesn't have to walk there, just needs to get to the railroad office in Miller's Creek. That's 30 miles south. They run mail to Denver twice a week. And Sagebrush Hollow. We can't use Sagebrush Hollow. Post office there might as well have a window into Wade Haskell's parlor. Every letter that goes through that office he knows about. Lian nodded. So someone must ride 30 miles to Miller's Creek without being followed. That's the problem. That is not the only problem. She set her cup down. If Polk and his men learn that I have information, real information, they will not wait. They will come in force. We must be fast, Caleb. Faster than they expect. Then let's start now. Tell me everything. They sat at the kitchen table, and Caleb wrote while Lian talked. She spoke for over an hour, and what came out of her mouth made his blood run cold. Names of men in San Francisco who ran the operation. Ship captains who transported girls from China. Middlemen in Sacramento, Reno, and Salt Lake City who brokered sales. Dates of shipments. Locations of holding houses where girls were kept before being sold. She remembered everything. Every conversation overheard. Every face. Every detail. She'd been collecting this information for 2 years, storing it away, like ammunition, waiting for the day she could use it. They spoke freely around you, Caleb said, still writing. I was furniture to them. Furniture does not listen. You listened. Every word. Every night. I made myself invisible so I could hear everything. She paused. There is one more thing. The man who runs the entire operation. I never saw his face, but I heard his name. They called him Mr. Crane. Caleb's pen stopped. Crane. You know this name. Jeremiah Crane. He's a businessman in San Francisco. Imports goods from China. At least that's what people think. Rich as God, and connected to every politician on the West Coast. Caleb put the pen down. Lian, if Crane is behind this, we're not dealing with some backwater smuggling ring. This goes all the way to the top. I know. And if he finds out you can connect him to human trafficking, he will kill me. Yes, I know this too. She met his eyes. I have known this since the first night I heard his name. I have been living with a death sentence for 2 years, Caleb. It is not new. The way she said it, calm, steady, factual, made Caleb's chest ache. 22 years old, and she'd already made peace with the possibility of being murdered for what she knew. Nobody's killing you, he said. Not while I'm breathing. Then we must make sure you keep breathing. Finish the letter. He finished writing just as the sun cleared the eastern hills. 8 pages. Names, dates, routes, locations. Enough to bring down an empire. He folded the pages, sealed them in an envelope, and addressed it to Thomas Avery, Federal Marshal, Denver. Now we need a writer, Caleb said. Someone we trust. Someone who can get to Miller's Creek without being spotted. There is no one. There's one person. Caleb grabbed his hat. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone. Where are you going? Into town. I'll be back before noon. Caleb, you cannot. Lock the door, Leon. He rode hard. The 10 miles to Sagebrush Hollow took just over an hour at a full gallop, and his horse was lathered and blowing when he reached the edge of town. He didn't go to the main street. Instead, he circled around to the back of Ruth Calloway's boarding house and tied his horse behind the woodshed. Ruth was in her kitchen, elbow deep in bread dough. She startled when Caleb appeared at the back door. Lord Caleb, you scared 10 years off me. I need help, Ruth. I figured. Nobody rides that hard for a social call. Come in before someone sees you. Inside, Caleb told her what he needed. Not everything, not the details about Crane or the trafficking ring. Just that he had information that needed to get to a federal marshal in Denver, and that it couldn't go through the local post office. Ruth wiped flour from her hands and listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, Samuel. The preacher. He rides to Miller's Creek every Thursday for supplies. Doesn't draw attention, people expect a preacher to travel. He leaves tomorrow morning. Can he be trusted? He's a man of God, Caleb. And more importantly, he's a man of conscience. He saw that girl at my table. He saw those bruises. It affected him. Ruth lowered her voice. He came to me the next day and asked what he could do to help. I need to talk to him. He's at the church. But Caleb, be careful. Haskell has men watching the streets. They know your horse. I came around back. Smart. Go through the alley. The church is 3 buildings down. Caleb found Samuel in the small wooden church, sweeping the floor between the pews. He was young, maybe 30, with the lean build of a man who ate little and worked hard. His eyes were kind, but there was steel in them. The kind of preacher who'd wrestled with his faith and come out the other side stronger. Mr. Drummond? Samuel set the broom aside. I was hoping you'd come. Ruth said you wanted to help. I've been praying on it since that day at the boarding house. What happened at that auction? What happens to those girls? It's an abomination before God. Samuel's voice carried the quiet intensity of a man who meant every word. What do you need? Caleb pulled the envelope from his coat. I need this to get to the railroad mail office in Miller's Creek, tomorrow, without anyone in this town knowing about it. Samuel took the envelope, turned it over, read the address. Federal Marshal. The less you know about what's inside, the safer you are. I'm not worried about safe, Mr. Drummond. I'm worried about right. Samuel tucked the envelope inside his Bible. I leave at first light. The letter will be on the Thursday mail train. If anyone asks, nobody asks a preacher about his Bible. Samuel almost smiled. Go home, take care of that girl, and pray, Mr. Drummond. We could all use some prayer right about now. Caleb was halfway back to the boarding house when he turned a corner and walked straight into Dale Haskell. They both stopped dead. Dale's eyes went wide, then narrow. Drummond, what are you doing in town? Free country, last I checked. Not for you it isn't, not anymore. Dale stepped closer. Where's the girl? At home. Home! Dale laughed. You mean that shack you call a ranch? My father's going to own that land before the year's out. Drought's going to finish what you started, old man. And when your well runs dry and your cattle die and you come crawling to town begging for help, nobody's going to lift a finger. I didn't come here to trade words with you, Dale. No. Then why are you here? Dale's eyes narrowed further. What are you up to, Drummond? Buying rope. Caleb held up his hands. That a crime now, too? Dale studied him suspicious, but unable to pin down what was wrong. My father wants that girl. One way or another, he's going to get her. Your father should worry about his own ranch. My father's ranch is the only thing keeping this town alive. Every business, every store, every man who works in this territory depends on Haskell money. You think you can go against that? Dale poked Caleb in the chest. You're nothing, Drummond. You've always been nothing, and that Chinese whore you're keeping isn't going to... Caleb hit him. One punch, straight and clean and hard enough to drop Dale Haskell in the dirt. Dale lay on his back, blood streaming from his nose, staring up at Caleb with pure shock. Nobody hit a Haskell. Nobody. It simply wasn't done. Call her that again, Caleb said, standing over him. Go ahead. Give me a reason. Dale scrambled to his feet, hand going to his gun. But before he could draw, a voice cut across the street. Touch that iron, and I'll drop you where you stand. Sheriff Birch was leaning against the wall of the feed store, arms crossed, one hand resting on his holstered pistol. Caleb hadn't even seen him there. He hit me. Dale sputtered, blood running down his chin. You saw it. That's assault. That's... What I saw, Birch said slowly, was a man defending a woman's honor after you used language no decent person should hear. Now I could arrest Caleb for throwing a punch. But then I'd have to write down exactly what you said that provoked him. And that report would become public record. You want the whole territory reading what comes out of your mouth, Dale? Dale's face went red, then white. He wiped the blood from his nose with the back of his hand. This isn't over. You Haskells keep saying that, Birch said. Starting to sound like a broken clock. Dale stalked away, and Birch pushed himself off the wall. He walked over to Caleb, his expression unreadable. You can't keep punching people, Caleb. He had it coming. He did. But the next time, it won't be his face he brings. It'll be his father's men, and there won't be a damn thing I can do about it if they catch you outside town limits. I know. Do you? Birch stepped closer. Because I've been hearing things, Caleb. Men from outside the territory showing up, asking questions about a Chinese girl. 3 strangers were drinking at the saloon last night, rough men, not miners, not ranchers, the kind who get paid to make problems disappear. Polk's men, or more like them. Caleb's jaw tightened. How long do I have? Days, maybe less. Birch looked him dead in the eye. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. Caleb rode home harder than he'd ridden in. The sun was high and brutal, and his horse was flagging by the time the ranch came into view. He was still half a mile out when he saw the smoke. Not from the chimney, from the barn. He kicked the horse into a dead run. The barn's east wall was on fire flames, licking up the dry timber. His 2 remaining horses were screaming inside. Caleb threw himself off the saddle and sprinted for the barn doors. He wrenched them open, and the heat hit him like a wall. Smoke poured out black and choking. He pulled his bandana over his face and plunged in. The horses were wild with terror, rearing and kicking in their stalls. Caleb grabbed the first one's halter and dragged the animal out, its hooves clattering on the wooden floor. He went back for the second. The fire was spreading fast, too fast. This wasn't an accident. Someone had set this. He got the second horse out just as a section of the roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. Coughing, eyes streaming, he stumbled into the yard. That's when he heard Leon screaming his name. She was running from the house, her face wild with fear. Caleb, Caleb, are you hurt? I'm fine. He grabbed her shoulders. Are you all right? Did anyone come to the house? No one came. I smelled the smoke and... She stopped, looked at the burning barn. They did this. While I was gone, They waited until I left and they set my barn on fire. To send a message. To send a message. They stood and watched the barn burn. There was nothing to save. The fire ate through the old timber like it was paper, and within 20 minutes the structure collapsed in on itself, sending a column of sparks into the cloudless sky. Caleb's hands were burned. His eyebrows were singed. His lungs felt like they'd been scoured with sandpaper. But the horses were alive. Lian was alive. He was alive. That was something. Lian took his hands and turned them over, examining the burns. "Come inside. I can help with this." "It's nothing." "It is not nothing. Come." Inside, she sat him down at the table and went to work. From Ruth's bundle of supplies, she pulled out herbs that Caleb hadn't noticed, things she'd gathered along the fence line that morning. She crushed them between her fingers, mixed them with water, and spread the paste across his burns. The pain eased almost immediately. "Your father taught you this too." "My father taught me everything worth knowing." She wrapped his hands with strips of clean cloth. "These will heal in 3 days. Do not get them wet." "Lian." "What?" "We can't stay here." She stopped wrapping, looked at him. "The letter is on its way," he said. "Samuel will send it tomorrow. But even if Avery gets it in a week, it'll be another week before he can act. That's 2 weeks. We don't have 2 weeks. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying they burned my barn today. Tomorrow it might be the house, with us inside it." He pulled his hands away from hers. "I need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach you." "And where is that? Where in this territory can a Chinese woman hide where these men cannot find her?" "Not in this territory. Ruth told me about a settlement, a community of Chinese families north of here near the Montana border, about 100 miles. They have their own town, their own protection. If I can get you there—" "No." "Lian." I said no. She stood up. Her voice was shaking, but not from fear, from anger. "You want to send me away, like cargo, like something to be shipped to the next place." "That's not what I have been sent from place to place for 2 years, packed and shipped and delivered. I will not be sent again. Not by you, not by anyone. I'm trying to protect you." "Then let me protect myself." She slammed her palm on the table. "I chose to stay here. I chose to be your partner. You do not get to make this decision for me." The words rang in the small kitchen. Caleb stared at her. She stared back. Neither one blinked. "You're right," he said finally. "I'm sorry." "Do not be sorry. Be smart." She sat back down. "We do not run. We do not hide. We fight. But we fight intelligently." "How?" "The letter is sent. Good. But we cannot wait 2 weeks for help that may not come. We need allies now, here, in this valley." "I don't have allies, Lian. I've been a hermit for 5 years. Nobody in this town owes me anything." "Then we make them owe us something." She leaned forward. "You told me the drought is killing everyone's land. Every ranch in this valley is suffering. What's your point?" "My point is that I know how to grow food in a drought. My father's methods, the deep-rooted plants, the water retention, the soil restoration. If it works on your land, other ranchers will want to know how. They will come to us. They will need us. And men do not destroy what they need." Caleb sat back. He'd been thinking about this problem like a soldier, rifles, defenses, escape routes. Lian was thinking about it like a farmer. And she was right. "You want to make us too valuable to kill." "I want to make us too valuable to lose." She paused. "There is a difference. It won't work on Haskell. He doesn't need anything from anyone. Haskell is not the problem. The problem is that Haskell controls this town because everyone depends on him. If we can break that dependency, if other ranchers can survive the drought without Haskell's money, his power shrinks." "That's a long game, Lian. We might not have time for a long game." "Then we play the short game and the long game at the same time." She held up one finger. "Short game, we survive tonight. We survive tomorrow. We keep our heads down until the letter reaches Denver." Another finger. "Long game, we start growing. We show this valley what a Chinese woman and a broken rancher can do with dead soil and no money. And if Haskell comes before the crops do, then we fight." She picked up the pitchfork she'd leaned against the wall. "I am getting better with this." Despite everything, the burned barn, the threats, the danger closing in from every direction, Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not hope exactly. Something harder than hope. Determination. "All right," he said. "We start tonight. I'll take first watch. You sleep. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we start your garden, and I teach you to shoot." "I thought you would never ask." That night, Caleb sat on the porch with his rifle, while the embers of his barn glowed orange in the dark. The air smelled like smoke and ash and the end of something. But underneath that smell, he could detect something else. The faint green scent of the herbs Leon had spread on his hands. Something growing in the middle of destruction. Inside the house, Leon slept. No crying tonight. Just the steady breathing of a woman who had made a decision and was at peace with it. Caleb watched the darkness and waited for whatever was coming next. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and surrounded by enemies. Their only allies were an old woman with a boarding house, a young preacher with a Bible, and a letter riding 30 miles through hostile territory. It wasn't enough, he knew that. But somewhere around midnight, when the stars were so thick they looked like spilled flour on a dark table, he heard Leon's voice from inside the house. She wasn't asleep after all. "Caleb." "Yeah." "The barn. Can you rebuild it?" "If I can get the wood." "Then we rebuild it. Bigger." He almost smiled. "Bigger. Much bigger. And when they see it, they will know. You cannot burn down people who build faster than you destroy." Caleb rocked in his chair. The embers of the old barn pulsed like a heartbeat in the dark. "Bigger," he repeated. "Bigger." He rocked. She breathed. The night turned slowly toward morning, and somewhere 30 miles south, a young preacher with a Bible and a sealed envelope was saddling his horse in the dark, preparing to ride. Samuel never made it to Miller's Creek. Ruth brought the news herself, riding out to the ranch on a borrowed mule just after sunrise. Caleb saw her coming up the road and knew from the way she sat in the saddle that something had gone wrong. Ruth Calloway didn't ride unless the world was ending. "They got him on the South Road," Ruth said, barely dismounting before the words came out. 5 miles outside town. 3 men. Took his horse, his supplies, and his Bible. Caleb felt the ground shift under his feet. The letter. Gone. They took everything. Leon was standing in the doorway. She'd heard it all. Her face didn't change, but her hand gripped the doorframe so hard her knuckles went white. "Is Samuel alive?" Caleb asked. "Barely. They beat him bad, Caleb. Broke his jaw. Left him on the side of the road. A freight driver found him this morning and brought him back to town." Ruth's voice cracked. "He's at my place. Can't talk. Can't eat. They broke a preacher's jaw for carrying a letter. Did they read it?" "I don't know. Probably." Caleb turned away. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. Samuel. A good man. A man of God who'd done nothing except try to help. And they'd beaten him like a dog on a back road. "This is my fault," Leon said from the doorway. Her voice was barely audible. "I should never have—" "Don't." Caleb spun around. "Don't you dare take this on yourself. The men who did this, they're the ones at fault, not you. Never you. They hurt him because of me. They hurt him because they're animals, and animals need to be stopped." Ruth looked between the two of them. "There's more. Sheriff Birch rode out to investigate. Found tracks. The men who attacked Samuel headed east toward the mining camps. Birch thinks they're Polk's men." "Polk works for Crane," Leon said. Ruth frowned. "Who's Crane?" "The man who runs everything." Caleb grabbed his hat from the porch railing. "Ruth, I need you to do something for me. Something dangerous." Caleb Drummond. "I've been dangerous since before you were born. What do you need? I need you to get a message to Sheriff Birch. Tell him I need to see him. Not in town. Here. Tonight. And tell him to come alone. What are you planning? Something stupid. But I'm fresh out of smart ideas. Ruth looked at him for a long moment, then at Leon, then back at Caleb. I'll tell him. But Caleb, the town is changing. What those men did to Samuel people are angry. Not at you, at them. A preacher beaten on a public road. That doesn't sit right with folks, not even the ones who don't care much for Chinese. Good. We're going to need that anger. After Ruth left, Leon sat at the kitchen table and rewrote the letter from memory. Every name, every date, every route. Her hand moved steadily across the paper, filling page after page, without pausing, without hesitating. Caleb watched her. You remember all of it. I told you. I remember everything. She didn't look up. They can burn every letter we write. I will write it again, and again, and again. They cannot burn what is inside my head. They'll try. Let them try. She finished the last page and set the pen down. There, 8 pages, identical to the first. We need a new plan to get it out. We need more than one plan. We need 3, 4. So many that even if they stop some, they cannot stop all. Caleb leaned against the counter. She was right. One letter, one route, one messenger that had been foolish. They needed to flood the channels, make it impossible to intercept everything. How many copies can you write? As many as you need. Write 5. Different envelopes, different names on the outside. We'll send them 5 different ways. Leon picked up the pen and started writing again without a word. By noon they had 5 identical letters. Caleb addressed each one differently. 3 to Thomas Avery at different known addresses, 1 to the U.S. Marshal's office in Denver, 1 to a federal judge whose name Birch had once mentioned. 5 copies. 5 chances. Now they needed 5 ways to send them. Sheriff Birch arrived after dark as requested. He came on foot, leading his horse the last mile to avoid the sound of hoofbeats. He was careful. That was good. It meant he understood how serious this had become. Heard about Samuel, Birch said, sitting on the porch. His face was drawn tight. I've been sheriff of this town for 8 years. Nobody's ever beaten a preacher on my road. It's not your road anymore, Caleb said. It's Crane's. Tell me about Crane. Leon told him. All of it. The trafficking ring, the routes, the holding houses, the names. Birch listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with every detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then, this is federal, way beyond anything I can handle with a badge and 2 deputies. That's why we wrote letters, 5 of them, but we need help getting them out. Birch rubbed his jaw. 5 different routes. 5 different messengers. People Crane's men won't suspect. I can get one to Miller's Creek myself. I'll ride out tomorrow under the pretense of official business. Nobody questions a sheriff. That's 1. Ruth has a cousin in Elkhorn. She could post one from there. 2. Leon spoke up. The freight driver. The one who found Samuel. He travels south every week. If we put a letter in a sealed package marked as goods. 3. Birch said, nodding. I know the driver. Tom Beecham. He's honest, and he doesn't scare easy. What about the railroad workers? Caleb said. Chinese crews working the line west of here. If Leon could get a message to them, they would help. Leon's voice was certain. They know about the trafficking. Some of them have lost sisters' daughters. If I ask them, they will carry a letter to Denver themselves. 4, Birch said. And the 5th? Caleb had been saving this one. I'll take it myself. The hell you will, Birch said. You ride out of this valley, you're a dead man. Haskell's got men watching every road. Not every road. There's an old cattle trail through the mountains. Runs north, then east, connects to the main road about 40 miles out. Nobody uses it anymore because of the rock slides, but I rode it 10 years ago. It's passable. That trail is suicide, Caleb. So is sitting here waiting for Crane's men to come finish what they started. Birch looked at Leon. Talk some sense into him. I have tried. He does not listen. But there was something in her voice, not approval exactly, but recognition. She understood why he needed to do this. I'll leave before dawn, Caleb said. Be back in 4 days if the trail holds. And if it doesn't, then 4 letters will have to be enough. Birch stood and adjusted his gun belt. I'll ride to Miller's Creek tomorrow. Ruth and Beecham can handle theirs, but Caleb, 4 days is a long time to leave her alone. She won't be alone. Caleb looked at Leon. You said you wanted to learn to shoot. I did. Lesson starts right now. They spent the next hour behind the house. Caleb set up tin cans on fence posts and put his old pistol in Leon's hands. She held it wrong at first, 2 tight arms, locked shoulders hunched. Relax your shoulders, Caleb said. The gun isn't your enemy. Let it be part of your hand. She fired. Missed everything. The recoil knocked her back a step. Again. She fired again. Clipped the fence post. Closer. Breathe out when you pull the trigger. Don't fight the gun. Work with it. Third shot. The can spun off the post and clanged against the ground. Leon lowered the pistol. Her eyes were wide. I hit it. You hit it. She raised the gun and fired 3 more times. 2 cans down, 1 miss. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her jaw was set. She wasn't afraid of the gun anymore. You're a natural, Caleb said. I am a woman who is tired of being helpless. She reloaded the way he'd shown her. Show me the rifle. By the time Birch left, Leon could hit a can at 50 yards with the rifle and put 3 out of 5 pistol shots in a circle the size of a dinner plate. Not expert, but good enough to make any man think twice about walking through that door uninvited. I'll send word through Ruth, Birch said as he mounted up. Anything changes, she'll know. Thank you, Nolan. Birch paused. Caleb, there's something else you should know. Wade Haskell called a meeting at the saloon tonight. Every rancher in the territory. He's talking about forming a committee, a citizens committee, he calls it. But we both know what that really means. A mob. A mob with a vote. He wants to pass a resolution ordering all Chinese out of the territory. If it passes, he'll have legal cover to do whatever he wants. When's the meeting? Tomorrow night. Can you stop it? A public meeting on what grounds man's got a right to talk. Birch shook his head. This is a political fight, Caleb, and I'm no politician. After Birch rode away, Caleb sat at the table with Leon. Between them lay the 5 letters sealed and ready. Tomorrow they'd scatter in 5 directions. If even one reached Denver, the full weight of federal law would come down on Crane's operation. But tomorrow night, Wade Haskell was going to try to turn the whole territory against them. I should go to that meeting, Leon said. Caleb looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Absolutely not. Think about it, Caleb. Haskell is going to stand up in front of every rancher in this valley and tell them I am dangerous, that I am a threat, that all Chinese are a plague that needs to be removed. She leaned forward. What happens if I walk in there, if they see me not a monster, not a threat, but a woman, a person? What happens is you get killed. What happens is they have to look at me while they vote to destroy me. And some of them, not all, but some will not be able to do it. You don't know that. I know people. I have been watching people decide my fate for 2 years. I know the difference between a man who hates and a man who is afraid. Haskell hates. But most of the men in that room will just be afraid. And fear can be changed. Hatred cannot. Caleb stared at her. Every instinct told him to say no, to lock her in the house and ride to that meeting himself and raise hell. But Leon wasn't asking his permission. She was telling him what she was going to do. If we go to that meeting, he said slowly, we need a plan. We can't just walk in and hope for the best. I have a plan. Of course you do. The drought, she said. Every rancher in that room is losing money, losing cattle, losing land. Haskell keeps them alive with loans that come with conditions. Loyalty, obedience. They hate him for it, but they have no choice. Go on. What if I offer them a choice? What if I stand up in that room and tell them I can save their crops, that I know methods, my father's methods, that can pull water from dead soil, that I can teach them for free what Haskell charges them for? They won't believe you. Then I show them. She pointed toward the garden she'd started 2 days ago. I planted seeds yesterday morning, deep-rooted herbs along the border just like I told you. Check them. Caleb walked outside to the garden plot. He knelt down and looked. In the dry, cracked earth, tiny green shoots were pushing up through the soil. In 2 days, in the middle of a drought, on land that hadn't grown anything in 3 years. He touched one of the shoots. It was real. He walked back inside. How? My father's techniques. The deep-rooted plants draw moisture from below. The mulch retains it. The companion planting creates shade. It is not magic, Caleb. It is knowledge. Knowledge that has been passed down in my family for generations. If the ranchers see this, they will not vote me out of the territory. They will beg me to stay. Caleb sat down. His mind was spinning. It was bold, reckless, possibly suicidal. And it was the smartest plan anyone had come up with since this whole mess started. All right, he said. We go to the meeting, but I'm bringing my rifle. Bring 2. He looked at her, and despite everything, the fear, the danger, the burned barn, the beaten preacher, the mob forming in town, he laughed. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Caleb Drummond laughed. Leon watched him with her head tilted. What is funny? Nothing. Everything. He wiped his eyes. 3 days ago, I rode into town for rope and coffee. Now I'm planning to walk into a room full of men who want us dead and let a Chinese woman lecture them about farming. Is that funny? It's insane. Insane is good. She picked up the pistol from the table and checked the chambers the way he'd taught her. Sane has not been working. Caleb shook his head, still half laughing, half terrified. Your father, the healer from Canton. I bet he never imagined his daughter would be sitting in a Wyoming ranch house cleaning a pistol and planning to take on a room full of angry cowboys. Leon was quiet for a moment, her hand stilled on the gun. My father imagined everything for me, she said softly. A good life, an education, a home where I would be respected. She looked up. He did not imagine this, but I think he would not be ashamed. He'd be proud as hell. You did not know him. I know you, and if he made you, he must have been something special. Her eyes glistened. She blinked it away quickly and stood up. Enough talk. We have work to do. 5 letters to distribute, 1 meeting to survive, and a garden to grow. And a barn to rebuild. Bigger. Bigger, he agreed. She walked to the door, then turned back. Caleb, when you ride the mountain trail tomorrow, the one Birch said was suicide. Yeah. Don't die. I'll do my best. Do better than your best. She held his gaze. I cannot do this alone. I do not want to do this alone. The words hung in the air between them. Not a confession, not a plea. Just truth. Simple and bare and more powerful than anything either of them had said since the day they met. I'll come back, he said. That's a promise. I will hold you to it. She walked out to the garden. Caleb watched her go, this woman who'd been sold 4 times, beaten, starved, and shipped across an ocean under false promises. This woman who could remember 8 pages of damning testimony word for word, make dead soil bloom in 2 days, and shoot a tin can off a fence post at 50 yards. This woman who'd looked Wade Haskell in the eye and said, I am not for sale. Caleb picked up the letter addressed to Thomas Avery and tucked it inside his coat. Tomorrow, he'd ride a trail that hadn't been used in a decade, through mountains that had killed better men carrying a letter that could bring down an empire. But tonight he sat on his porch and watched Lian work in her garden by lamplight, her hands in the soil, coaxing life out of dust. And he thought about what she'd said. I cannot do this alone. I do not want to do this alone. Neither did he. Not anymore. Caleb left before the stars faded. He kissed his hand and pressed it against the doorframe of his own house, like a man who wasn't sure he'd see it again. Lian stood on the porch, holding the rifle he'd taught her to use 2 days ago. She didn't say goodbye. She just nodded once, and he rode. The mountain trail was worse than he remembered. Rockslides had eaten whole sections of the path, and his horse picked its way through loose shale that shifted and crumbled with every step. Twice he had to dismount and lead the animal across gaps where the trail had simply ceased to exist. His burned hands screamed every time he gripped the reins. But the letter was inside his coat. 8 pages that could bring down Jeremiah Crane. 8 pages that Lian had written from memory after the first set was stolen off a beaten preacher. 8 pages that were worth more than his life, and he knew it. He made Miller's Creek by nightfall the second day, walked into the railroad mail office, paid 12 cents postage, and watched the clerk toss the envelope into the Denver bag like it was nothing, like it wasn't a bomb wrapped in paper. He rode home faster than he'd ridden out, pushed the horse hard, slept only 4 hours in a shallow cave, and crested the ridge above his ranch just as the sun was setting on the 4th day. The ranch was still standing, the garden was still growing, and Lian was sitting on the porch with the rifle across her knees exactly where he'd left her. "You're alive," she said. "Promised I would be." "You're late." Trail was rough. The letter, on a train to Denver. Something released in her face. A tension he hadn't noticed because it had been there since the day he met her. Not gone, just loosened, like a rope that had been cut one strand at a time. "The meeting," Caleb said, dismounting. "When is it?" "Tonight. 2 hours." "Did the other letters go out?" "Birch delivered his to Miller's Creek the same day you left. Ruth's cousin posted one from Elkhorn. Beecham took one south with his freight." She paused. "And the Chinese railroad workers, they sent a man to Denver on foot. He left 3 days ago." 5 letters. 5 routes. Crane's men couldn't stop them all. It was mathematically impossible. "Then we go to the meeting," Caleb said. "You need to eat first." "I need to change my shirt. I smell like a horse that slept in a cave." "You smell like a man who kept his promise." She almost smiled. "But yes, change your shirt." They rode into Sagebrush Hollow together as the last daylight bled out of the sky. Caleb on his horse, Lian behind him, her arms around his waist. She carried a burlap sack in one hand. He didn't ask what was in it. The saloon was packed. Every rancher, farmer, and businessman within 30 miles had come. Horses lined the street. Voices poured out through the open windows. Caleb could feel the tension from 50 yards away. "Ready?" he asked. "I have been ready for 2 years." They dismounted. Caleb tied the horse. They walked toward the saloon doors, and every man on the street stopped talking and stared. The Chinese girl and the hermit rancher, walking into Wade Haskell's meeting like they owned the building. Caleb pushed through the doors. The noise inside dropped to nothing. Wade Haskell stood at the front of the room on a raised platform, a piece of paper in his hand. His resolution. Around him, 40 or 50 men sat in chairs and stood along the walls, drinks in hand, faces hard. Dale stood behind his father, arms crossed, a fresh bruise still yellowing on his jaw where Caleb had put it. Wade saw them first. His eyes went cold. "This is a private meeting, Drummond. Sign on the door says public gathering. I can read Wade. She's not welcome here. Last I checked, you don't own the saloon." The saloon owner, a thin man named Greer, shifted uncomfortably behind the bar. He didn't confirm or deny. Caleb walked Lian to the center of the room. Every eye followed them. He could feel the hostility like heat from a stove. But underneath it, curiosity. These men had heard stories about the Chinese girl. Most had never seen her up close. "Get on with your meeting, Wade," Caleb said. "We'll wait our turn." Wade's jaw worked. He wanted to throw them out, but doing it by force in front of the whole territory would make him look like a tyrant, and Wade Haskell was smart enough to know that power requires the illusion of fairness. Fine. Wade held up his resolution. "Gentlemen, you know why we're here. The Chinese problem in this territory has gone too far. They take our jobs, they undercut our wages, they bring disease and foreign customs that threaten our way of life. I'm proposing a resolution signed by every rancher and businessman present, demanding that all Chinese be removed from the territory within 30 days. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Heads nodded. "Furthermore," Wade continued, "any citizen who harbors, employs, or assists Chinese individuals will face consequences. Economic consequences. Social consequences. This is our land, our territory, and our right to protect it." More nods. Louder murmurs. Dale was smiling. "I call for a vote," Wade said. "All in favor? I'd like to speak." Every head turned. Leon had stepped forward. She stood in the middle of the room, 5 feet 2 inches tall, holding her burlap sack surrounded by men who wanted her gone. Wade laughed. "You don't have the right to speak here, girl." "I have the right to speak anywhere." Her voice carried clear and strong across the silent room. "I am a free person standing on free soil, and I have something to say." "Nobody wants to hear. Let her talk." The voice came from the back of the room. Old Tom Kinney, who ran a small cattle operation on the eastern edge of the valley. He'd lost half his herd to the drought. "Let the girl talk, Haskell. What's the harm?" A few other voices murmured agreement. Not out of sympathy, out of curiosity. These men wanted to see what would happen. Wade's face darkened, but he stepped aside. "Fine. Talk. And then we vote." Leon set the burlap sack on the floor and opened it. She pulled out a handful of green shoots, thick, healthy, vibrant green, and held them up for the room to see. These grew on Caleb Drummond's land, in 2 days, in the middle of this drought, on soil that hasn't produced anything in 3 years. Silence. "That's impossible," someone said. "Come see for yourself." Leon set the plants on the nearest table. "Any man in this room is welcome to ride out to the Drummond Ranch and look at the garden. The soil is coming alive. The plants are taking root, and within 2 weeks there will be food growing on land that Mr. Haskell himself said was dead." "Tricks," Dale said from behind his father. "Chinese tricks." "Not tricks, knowledge. My father was a healer and a farmer in China. He spent his life learning how to grow food in conditions far worse than this. Droughts that lasted years, soil that everyone said was finished." She looked around the room. "Every ranch in this valley is dying. Your cattle are starving. Your wells are running low. How many of you have gone to Mr. Haskell for loans this year?" Nobody answered, but Caleb could see the discomfort on their faces. She'd hit a nerve. "My father's methods work. Deep-rooted plants that pull water from underground. Companion planting that retains moisture, soil restoration techniques that have been used in China for 1,000 years. She stepped forward. "I am offering to teach every rancher in this room for free. No loans, no conditions, no debt." The room erupted. Men were talking over each other, some angry, some skeptical, some, and this was the part that mattered, genuinely interested. Old Tom Kinney pushed to the front. "How do we know this isn't a con?" "You don't." Leon met his eyes. "But you know what is happening to your land right now. You know what will happen if this drought continues another month. You know that Mr. Haskell's loans come with strings. I am offering you an alternative. All I ask is that you come look before you vote." "This is ridiculous," Wade said, his composure finally cracking. You're going to let a Chinese girl tell you how to run your ranches. Your grandfathers built this territory. Your fathers died defending it. And now you're going to take farming advice from someone who knows what she's talking about." Ruth Calloway's voice cut through the noise. She'd been standing by the door. Nobody had noticed her come in. "I've seen that garden with my own eyes. 2 days ago it was dirt. Today it's growing. If any of you men had the sense God gave a goat, you'd listen to her. Ruth, this isn't your... Don't you tell me what's mine and what isn't, Wade Haskell. My husband built half the buildings in this town. I've got as much right to speak as any man here." The room had shifted. Caleb could feel it. The certainty that had filled the space when Wade started talking was fracturing. Men were looking at the green plants on the table, then at their own weathered hands, and doing the math that desperate men always do. "I'll come look," Tom Kinney said. "Tomorrow morning. If it's real, I'm in." "So will I," said another voice. Ben Fowler ran sheep on the North Ridge. His flock was down to half what it had been a year ago. "Count me in," said a third. Pete Sweeney, who hadn't been able to pay his feed bill in 2 months. One by one, men spoke up. Not all of them. Not even most. But enough. 7 ranchers agreed to ride out to the Drummond Ranch the next morning to see Leon's garden for themselves. Wade watched it happening, and his face went through stages: anger, disbelief, calculation. Dale was whispering furiously in his ear, but Wade wasn't listening. He was watching his power slip away in real time, carried off by a handful of green shoots and a Chinese woman who refused to be invisible. "This meeting is adjourned," Wade said abruptly. "We'll vote another day." He walked out of the saloon without looking at Caleb or Leon. Dale followed, shooting a look at them that promised violence. But the damage was done. The vote hadn't happened. The resolution hadn't passed. And 7 men who'd walked in ready to sign away Leon's future had walked out willing to give her a chance. Outside, Caleb leaned against the hitching post and let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a week. "You did it. We did it. And it is not over. Tomorrow they come. The garden must speak for itself." "It will? And Haskell will not stop." "No, he won't." She stood beside him, looking up at the sky. "Caleb, if the letters reach Denver, if the federal marshals come, what happens to Crane?" "He goes to prison, him and everyone who works for him." "And the girls, the ones still being held? They get freed." She was quiet for a long moment. "I was one girl on a shipping crate. If this works, if the letters reach the right people, hundreds of girls could be saved. Because of you. Because you listened and remembered. Because a man with $3 decided to open his mouth at an auction." She looked at him. "We are an unlikely pair, Caleb Drummond." "The best pairs usually are." They rode home under a sky full of stars. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Something had shifted between them. Not the sudden spark of romance novels, but the slow, deep settling of 2 people who had tested each other and found something solid. The next morning, 7 ranchers rode up to the Drummond Ranch. Tom Kinney was first. He knelt in the garden and touched the green shoots with trembling fingers. "I'll be damned," he said. "I'll be goddamned." Leon taught them for 3 hours. Drew diagrams in the dirt. Showed them which plants to use, how deep to dig, where to place the mulch. The men listened. Some asked questions. Some argued. But by the end, every one of them was planning how to apply what they'd learned to their own land. Word spread. Over the next week, more ranchers came. Then their wives. Then their children. Lyon's garden became a classroom, and Leon became something nobody in Sagebrush Hollow had ever seen before: a Chinese woman that white ranchers came to for help. Wade Haskell tried to stop it. He called in loans, threatened to cut off water rights, sent Dale to intimidate anyone who visited the Drummond Ranch, but it was too late. The ranchers had seen the green shoots. They'd tasted the possibility of survival without Haskell's money. And then 12 days after Caleb had mailed the letter from Miller's Creek, a column of dust appeared on the main road into Sagebrush Hollow. 6 riders. Federal badges. led by a tall man with a gray mustache and eyes like flint. Thomas Avery had come. Caleb was in town when they arrived. He watched Avery dismount and scan the street with the practiced eye of a man who'd been hunting criminals for 20 years. Caleb Drummond. Avery shook his hand. Got your letter. All 5 of them, actually. Somebody really wanted this message delivered. Somebody did. We've already moved on the San Francisco operation. Arrested 12 men, including 3 ship captains. Freed 41 girls from a holding house near the waterfront. Avery's voice was grim. But the man at the top crane, he's gone to ground. We need your witness, the girl. She's the key to everything. Her name is Leanne, and she's ready. Leanne testified for 4 hours. She sat in Sheriff Birch's office across from Avery and 2 federal prosecutors and recited everything. Names, dates, routes, holding locations. She didn't hesitate, didn't waver, didn't break. When she finished, Avery sat back in his chair and let out a long breath. Miss Chen, do you understand what you've just given us? I have given you the truth. You've given us enough to dismantle the largest human trafficking ring on the West Coast. Crane won't be able to hide forever. When we find him, and we will, your testimony will put him away for the rest of his natural life. Good, Leanne said. Then it was worth it. There's something else. Avery pulled a document from his satchel. Given your cooperation and the extraordinary risks you've taken, the federal government is prepared to grant you full legal residency in the United States. You'll be protected under federal law. No territory, no state, no local ordinance can force you to leave. Leanne took the document. Her hands were steady, but Caleb could see the pulse jumping in her throat. She read it twice. Then she looked up at Avery. I do not want protection for myself only. The Chinese workers on the railroad, the families in the mining camps, they deserve the same. Avery blinked. He'd expected gratitude, not negotiation. Miss Chen, that's not really... It is exactly what this is about. I did not survive 2 years of slavery so that I alone could be safe. Every Chinese person in this territory deserves to live without fear. Caleb watched Avery's face. The marshal was recalculating. Looking at this small woman who'd just handed him the biggest case of his career and was now making demands. I'll see what I can do, Avery said finally. Do more than see. Do it. Avery looked at Caleb. She always liked this. Getting worse every day, Caleb said. Best thing that ever happened to this territory. 3 days later, Wade Haskell rode out of Sagebrush Hollow and never came back. Not because of the federal marshals. Avery couldn't touch him for anything directly connected to Crane. But because the ranchers had stopped coming to him for loans. They were going to Lyon instead. And Wade Haskell, who could handle enemies and threats and violence, couldn't handle being irrelevant. Dale stayed long enough to get drunk at the saloon and tell anyone who'd listen that his father would return and reclaim everything. Then he rode out too, following Wade to wherever men go when the world they built stops needing them. Polk and his men were arrested at the mining camp east of town. They'd been waiting for orders from Crane that never came. The federal marshals found them sitting around a cold campfire, confused and leaderless. They went without a fight. Samuel healed. His jaw wired shut. For 6 weeks he communicated by writing notes on a small chalkboard. The first thing he wrote when Caleb visited was, "Did the letter get through?" Caleb told him 5 of them did. Samuel wrote, "God works in volume." Ruth Calloway appointed herself the unofficial welcomer of every Chinese family that began settling in the valley after Avery's federal protections went into effect. She served them meals at her boarding house and butchered the pronunciation of their names with cheerful determination. "I'll get it right eventually," she told Leanne. "Just give me a decade or 2. And the garden grew. It grew beyond the borders of the Drummond Ranch and spread across the valley like something alive and unstoppable. Tom Kinney's land produced its first crop in 2 years. Ben Fowler's sheep had grass again. Pete Sweeney paid off his feed bill and bought his wife a new dress for the first time since their wedding. Leanne taught them all. Patient, demanding, tireless. She walked their fields and read their soil and told them hard truths about what they'd been doing wrong. Some of them resented a Chinese woman telling them their business. Most got over it the first time they saw green, where there had only been brown. On a warm evening in September, 2 months after the auction that started everything, Caleb sat on his porch rebuilt wider than before and watched Leanne walking through her garden. Their garden. It covered half an acre now, bursting with squash beans, herbs, and flowers she'd planted just because they were beautiful. She walked up to the porch and sat beside him. Her hands were stained with soil. Her face was brown from the sun. The bruises were long gone. Caleb. Yeah. I want to show you something. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. I went to the land office today, with Sheriff Birch. He took the paper, unfolded it, read it twice because the first time the words didn't make sense. It was a deed, in Leanne's name, for 40 acres of the Drummond Ranch, the eastern section where her garden had begun. Caleb's signature was already on it. He'd signed it 2 weeks ago when she'd asked him to put his name on a document for the land office, and he'd trusted her enough not to read it. You deeded yourself my land. You deeded me your land. You signed it. I thought it was a water rights form. It was not a water rights form. He stared at her. She stared back. Neither blinked. Leanne Chen, he said slowly, did you just swindle me out of 40 acres? I prefer the word partnership. You said I was your partner. Partners own things together. I also said I'd teach you to shoot. Didn't expect you to shoot me. You still have 60 acres. I have 40. This is fair. Fair. More than fair. My garden feeds your cattle. My herbs supply the general store. My teaching brings ranchers to your door. 40 acres is a bargain, Caleb Drummond. He looked at the deed, looked at her, looked at the garden, looked at the valley stretching out before them, green where it had been, brown, alive where it had been dying. Then he laughed. Laughed until his eyes watered and his ribs ached, and Leanne was watching him with that expression she wore when she couldn't tell if he was happy or losing his mind. 40 acres, he said, wiping his eyes. First Chinese woman to own land in Wyoming territory. First Chinese woman to own land in this territory, she corrected. There will be more. I don't doubt it. He folded the deed carefully and handed it back to her. You earned it, Leanne, every inch. She took the paper and held it against her chest. For a moment, just a moment, the armor cracked, and he saw the girl who'd stood on a shipping crate with rope burns on her wrists and terror in her eyes. Then the moment passed and she was Leanne again, 40 acres of solid ground under her feet and a whole valley learning her name. Caleb. Yeah. Thank you. For the $3. He rocked in his chair. Best $3 I ever spent. You only had $3. You had no choice. Everybody's got a choice, Leon. That's the whole point. She nodded. Set the deed on the porch railing. Looked out at the valley where the sun was pouring gold across fields that shouldn't have been green but were. My father would have liked you, she said. I would have liked him. He would have said you were a foolish man with a good heart. He'd have been right. He usually was. They sat on that porch as the sun went down and the stars came out one by one over a valley that had tried to break them both and failed. Two people who had nothing, a bankrupt rancher and a girl sold for $3, had built something that couldn't be bought, couldn't be burned, and couldn't be taken away. Not a love story. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something rarer. Something harder to find and harder to destroy. A partnership, forged in dust and danger, and 3 crumpled dollar bills. And it was enough. Now click on the video on the screen, because the next story carries something you can't explain, only feel. And when it ends, you won't be the same. Click on the video now.